thought he was talking to himself alone. And he didn't know that someone was listening to him talking to himself loudly outside the room, where his grandfather stood next to the door of the room, listens to what he told himself. And yet there was no surprise on his face. It was as if hearing from his talk about coming down the crypt was not something that made any difference to him, but it seemed it's like something he expected to happen. He remained standing until Khaled fell silent. The lights of his room were turned off, and the calm controlled the place that was interrupted only by this distinctive voice, which he knows very well when his grandson is sleeping. After that, leaning on his cane, he left for his room, where he sat silently on his sofa for minutes. Then he moved his cane to pull with it a small wooden box that looked antique and opened it, and took out. The old photo album was covered with a lot of dust. After he removed the dust from it, he began to stir in its pages page after page and see the pictures, until he stopped a lot at one of them. The next day, both Khaled and his grandfather woke up early, as they always used to. Khaled has his early work, and his grandfather doesn't sleep after the Fajr prayer, and he keeps reading in God's book until he gets up, and they had breakfast together, which is prepared for them by a girl who lives next door. She got used to this years ago. Until Khaled sat down and was looking at his grandfather between now and the other one, as if he wanted to tell him something. Until he broke his silence and he asked his grandfather,
Abdel,
as he liked to call him,
can you live on your own?
his grandfather looked at him. He showed that he did not understand his question.
Do you want to travel or what?
Khaled shut up, and he looked at him again.
If only I traveled for a little while, can you live alone?
Then he continued as if clarifying his words.
I know that my words are a shock to you, but I decided to leave the country for a while, and I swear to you that I will be back as soon as possible, and you won't feel my absence.
Then he tried to justify his talk.
I'm going to travel to a place where I find myself. I feel my presence in it. You know, your son's son, a graduate of the Faculty of Commerce, does what?
Yeah, works in a medicine store.
Your son's son works as a box carrier at a medicine store. A box carrier? Get this carton, put it here. Take this carton and take it there.
Then he stand up to leave, and he told his grandfather.
I won't be traveling for long.
Then he turned outside until his grandfather's words stopped him.
Why are you lying, Khaled? Why don't you want to tell me you're going to the crypt?
Those words were like a thunderbolt directed at Khaled after he made up his desire to travel for a while so that his grandfather wouldn't know about it. And he thinks he's gone crazy. And he didn't know how his grandfather knew what he was planning to. He looked at him confused.
The crypt? How did you find out? I mean, the crypt of what? What is this nonsense?
Then his grandfather continued.
I knew a long time ago, from a very long time ago.
Then he ordered him to sit down again. He asked him seriously.
Why do you want to go to the crypt?
Khaled shut up. Then he spoke, trying to make the conversation a joke.
Why are you so adamant about this crypt story? I told you I was going to travel.
His grandfather repeated his question.
Why do you want to go to the crypt?
He found no escape and let out a long exhalation and answered.
I want to go and prove to Mona and her father that I am a hero. I'm different from everyone else.
Grandfather asked him.
Just that.
He replied in exclamation.
Yes, just that.
And continued.
And who knows, I might find the treasure you went looking for before.
Then his grandfather repeated his question.
Just that.
Yes.
His grandfather said seriously.
You don't want to go for this reason.
Khaled looked at him in wonder at the seriousness that he had never seen on his face before, until his grandfather continued.
If Mona married someone else, would you go to the crypt or not?
Khaled shut up, and his grandfather continued.
I will never believe that you want to go for Mona. You want to go for another completely different reason. The reason I went and others went. The reason that's going on in our blood. My blood, your father's blood. The reason is our love of the unknown, our love of rebellion, our love to discover something new, our love of difference.
And he said again,
When you were little, I used to tell you about the crypt when you cried, and maybe you just see it as a story I'm telling you to make you stop crying. But believe me, I knew that one day you will grow up and I will tell you again about the crypt. Just a little anecdote about him and it will touch your heart.
And he continued,
You are rejected by Mona's father, and you know the reason for his refusal. Hear me, this time you loved becoming a hero, until yesterday came, and the same thing happened to your father when I told him about the crypt. But the difference is that I knew you wanted to go to the crypt, but he suddenly went.
Then Khaled interrupted him.
My father went to the crypt.
He replied,
Not just your father took your mother with him. They thought they were going to go on a little trip and come back. That's why they left you at the age of 2. They said, We'll be back in a few days. But the days became months, the months became years. The years passed and they did not return. And all people thought they died in an accident. And they were thankful to our God that you were not with them and survived this incident. But the fact is that they went to the crypt.
Then he sighed and continued,
I didn't blame them for that. I told myself that you also went to the crypt and were proud of yourself. But the difference is that our God saved you.
Then he looked at Khaled.
That's why I'll never be sad if you go to the crypt. Even if I know that this decision of yours may drive you away from me. But you must be sure that you will go for yourself. You will not go for a fictitious reason that you put to yourself as Mona.
Then he stood up and he walked a few steps, giving Khaled his back.
Let me know when you decide, because I have a lot to say about Furyx's crypt. Someone else will tell you about it.
Then Khaled left, and he didn't go to his work as he went every day, but went to meet Mona. After she called him, and she asked to meet him at one of the places inside Mansoura University, where they always meet. On his way, he was preoccupied only with his grandfather's talk to him. Does he want to go to the crypt for the love of Mona or for the love of adventure? Then he remembered his grandfather's talk about his parents, who he knows nothing about their appearance. He always found himself with his grandfather, and he did not see a single picture for his father and mother. Only the words of some of his relatives helped him to imagine them. He is as tall as his father. He was almost as tall as his father, who is more than 180 centimeters. As they used to tell him, his broad shoulders and strong environment, these things they say he's like his dad in. As for his mother's relatives, they always told him that his dark black hair and his constant smile always remain a resemblance between him and his mother. Then he thought back to that man whose grandfather had told him that he had a lot to say about the crypt, and this name he heard for the first time, Furyx's crypt. His thinking remained busy until he got to the place where he was going to meet Mona. He found her waiting for him with its distinctive hijab and its many colors, and her brunette cloak, which he always caressed, and told her that he gets upset when she meet him in that cloak. He looked at her with a smile, and she didn't smile as usual. She said,
I'm sorry that my dad behaved like this to you for the 8th time.
Then Khaled slotted.
No, I'm used to it. I became exposed in the country. Mainly people say about me that I hit the record for refusing your marriage to me and that I should be ranked in the Guinness Book.
He said those words in order to get her out of the sad state in which he found her, but without interest, and she continued.
I thought my dad wanted a different person, but unfortunately Dad suddenly changed.
Khaled was amazed.
What do you mean by changed?
She replied.
A doctor proposed to my father to marry me, of course. I was sure that my father would refuse, but I was surprised that he agreed.
Khaled shouted.
What? Agreed.
Yes, he agreed, and he insisted that I must marry him.
And some of her tears fell as Khaled was shocked.
And me?
I tried to talk to him about my love for you, but he hit me in the face. He knows my interest more than me, and that my future is guaranteed with the doctor, and that I will get tired with you.
Mona was talking, and her conversation was mixed with tears, and Khaled listens to her incredible what his ears hear. What does this crazy dad want? He was telling him that he wanted someone for his daughter unique of its kind, but it seems that he wanted anyone but Khaled Hasni. The love of those years is lost overnight. He has never loved in his life like he loved her, and why didn't she object to her father's decision? Did she give up out of fear of her spinsterhood? All the questions went through his mind while she was talking, until she asked him to leave so as not to be late her return to her home. It's like she's running away from meeting him. He smiled sarcastically, motioning her with his hand to leave without uttering. It was the first time he let her go alone, and he sat where he was looking to her as she leaves. It's like the last time he sees her, and he's suffocated by this tightness that he feels with it. This is the first time he feels defeated. A feeling he had never experienced before. He didn't notice it every time he proposed to her and was rejected. He knew there was such a thing as hope even if he proposes to her 100 times until her father accepts. He remembers enduring people's looks at him and their ridicule when he told them that he was going to marry her one day. A love story will remain immortalized by history. He thought he was a fool when he once asked her to marry him without knowing her father's, and she refused, and their fight lasted for a long time until he apologized to her again. But it's even more foolish now. She will agree with that doctor. Her father also agreed. Maybe she wanted to meet me this time just to satisfy her conscience. This how he talked to himself. The love of years melts like a piece of ice in a few seconds, until he was interrupted by the sound of his phone ringing. When he answered, he found the employer, who his employer scolds him for his absence. He can't hold his temper and tells him that he won't work for him again, and cut the call. Then he returned to his hometown. He walks through its streets headlong, feel the taste of defeat in his throat. He doesn't want to talk to anyone. Until he got home, he entered his room and then looked at its walls are covered with those sheets that he always hung, his proposal papers to marry Mona and his rejection 8 times. And he stood in front of each sheet separately looking at it and scoffing from himself, and he laughs out loud like he's gone crazy, and then he rips them all off. He sat on the floor of the room with his head in his hands, swimming in his memories again, until he got up and went to his grandfather's room. He ended his prayer and asked him,
You told me that someone has a lot of talk about the crypt.
Have you finally decided?
Yes, I want to go to the crypt.
For Mona?
Khaled held his own.
I can't get to Mona right now. I quit my job and I have to go.
And he continued.
I have to find something in my life that I can tell my children after me. I want to feel like I am a hero on time in front of myself. My sense of failure is killing me.
Then his grandfather asked him,
Aren't you afraid of not being back like your mother and father?
Then he replied,
Believe me, the only thing I was afraid of was to leave you alone. But as long as you encourage me, there is no place for any fear in my heart.
Then his grandfather smiled.